So, let me go ahead and make my announcements. Number one, all the assignments for week 3 and week 4 are open. Week 3 and 4, with the exception of the final project, will close this Wednesday. Will close this Wednesday. So please, please, please try to get in everything this Wednesday. If you have outstanding work, please try to get caught up. I've seen quite a few assignments that need to be turned in. So if you guys can go ahead and try to round that up, that'd be great. What else? Yeah, that's the main thing. So today we're in chapter 13, and we're just gonna be talking about like the basic stuff, first day on the job. Some things you may know, some things you may not have known, but we won't spend too much time on this because I know we have a couple of people that need to make up their mock interviews. You guys still have a lot to turn in, and I really want to give you your time back so that you can get that done. So with that being said, there's this thing called imposter syndrome. Some of you may have heard of it, maybe not, but it is centered around knowing a lot. And I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm going through it right now. Um, my I'm not gonna say I'm transitioning into IT, but it's a newer field for me. And someone has asked me to write something on AI, and I'm totally freaked out. Like, and I have to meet with this person. I'm totally freaked out. Now, even though I have a law degree in IT, law and technology, I have a master's in it. I've taken boot camps on it. I've done all of that stuff. I do not feel like I know anything about it. Isn't that nuts? I don't feel like I know anything about it. Like I'm actually feeling like I'm gonna clam up. But this imposter syndrome thing is so real, right? Because you feel like you don't know what you're doing. You feel like you don't know, but in reality, you probably know a lot more than you think, right? Because you haven't really tested yourself. And I think that's what my problem is with AI. Is like I haven't tested myself. Like I've done some work, but not a lot, right? So I get it. I'm dealing with it right now. And so when you start your first job, you're probably, in a very similar situation. You're probably going to be nervous. You're probably, where do I start? You're going to feel like, okay, I don't know anything. And most of us, not that we will clam up, literally, but in our minds, like we could be crashing out, kind of like I'm crashing out a little bit. But that is just normal. And so that's what we want people to understand. So chapter 13 just talks about understanding, knowing that it's your first day on the job. It is very overwhelming, but it's exciting too, right? You want to get started, you want to get in there, not just to see what you do know, but just to learn and to get comfortable and to do what you've set out to do. Like it takes a lot of effort to go to school, to retrain yourself, to learn a new skill, and some of us, we have this anxiety and we just want to get started. It is completely, completely normal, especially on the first day. And sometimes we crash out starting the job only to be let down because what tends to happen on that first day? Paperwork. So we already know that we're going to be dealing with tons and tons of paperwork on the first day. Most of it has to do with federal guidelines. So make sure you bring everything with you. The law states that within 3 days, anybody that hires someone, they have to disclose to the federal government that they have a new employee, obviously for tax purposes. But so that's why they want you to do those I-9 forms, W-4 forms, and all those benefits forms right out the gate. So make sure you just have all your documents with you. Some people just, I guess, assume that those things can, oh, I'll just get around to it. No, you can't get around to that because by federal law, all companies have to get that done within 72 hours. Most of you will have on site, so obviously arrive on time. We know that. We keep talking about that, being very enthusiastic and, pleasant to everyone. But we don't know these people yet, right? Stay, open-minded, and, learn as much as you can, ask as many questions as you can. Specifically when it comes to, working with HR, this is the time that you're going to be given that time with HR. Like I said, this is most HR departments. What do? They hire, they fire, and they train. So once they're done with you, they're off to the next group, and sometimes it's more difficult to get a hold of them. So use this time wisely. If you do have any remote work, sometimes, you may onboard somewhere else. Some companies even use like hotel conference rooms to do onboarding. It just depends upon the type of institution that you'll work with. Obviously, you need to just make sure you understand where you're going. Try to do as much research as you can with the company, like we've said, so when they're talking about new projects and who the CEO is and all that stuff, like, you don't look like a deer in headlights, right? Like, you want to know as much as you can. Like, it's not a test, so don't worry about that. But try to just, know as much as you can. That way you're comfortable. Don't make yourself overwhelmed because you don't know anything or you don't read anything about the company. And so now you're hearing all this information for the first time. The more you can prepare yourself, the better. That is really the point. Again, let's not set ourselves up for failure. That first week or so, you're probably, especially if you're in a big institution, you're probably going to be doing a lot of new hire training, right? That's just a part of onboarding you. They have to do it. It's one of the reasons why companies hate having to look for new people, because all of this stuff takes time. You're not working in the first couple of days. What are you doing? You're training. Now, some of us may hit the ground running, but most of us are not. Even if you're just shadowing other people, like, they're not getting their money's worth from you in the first couple of weeks. That's just what it is, right? Because they have to do a lot of training, a lot of onboarding, engaging with your supervisor, learning the institution, taking tours of the facility. So just program yourself to know that that is going to be the first, probably, couple days, maybe a couple weeks of your experience, on your new job, right? There are a lot of things that HR has to check off with you. Some of us have had jobs, so we've seen this before, so it's no big deal. Others, this may be our first time in like a corporate environment, even though you say, okay, well, I'm going into trades. Well, it's still ran by corporations, so it just depends on how big the corporation that you're going to work for, how sophisticated this onboarding process will be. But because this is the time that you are going to have that one-on-one specifically with HR and trainers, and all these people are coming together to welcome you. Use that time wisely, guys. Ask the questions that you need to ask as it relates to anything that you didn't, get answered in the interview. Obviously, in an interview, you probably didn't do tons of talking about benefits and things of that nature. Most times when you're in the screening, and sometimes the HR person will actually meet with you after you've accepted the job to talk to you about benefits and things of that nature. Now, clearly, that's something you can ask the screener even before you go into an actual interview, if that's important to you. Do you guys have like medical, dental, um, you know, what does that look like? Without going too far into the weeds, that's an important thing to you. That's something that you can ask. But definitely, on the back end, when you go into this training, some things you may want to always think to ask, obviously the hours, who to call for in case of emergency, especially if you're out and about, technical issues, what type of equipment you're going to get, hopefully they go over the benefits and supplies and things of that nature. As much as I've been in corporate America, I don't know what it is with the supplies, man. Like, I just don't know what it is. Some company, just getting supplies, having supplies, you'd be surprised. I've come to some companies where they've literally given me a desk, and I'm still waiting on the laptop, so I'm just sitting around with a desk with nothing. Like, I've been to some really companies that are just not prepared. And then I've been to some companies where everything is pretty sophisticated. Like, I show up and I got a basket on my desk and all the supplies I need, and my computer's ready, and I don't have to wait, and they've set my phone up. I mean, and they're ready to go. And I go through this training, and you're like being, herded around from one, stop to the next. And it's very, very sophisticated. So it really just depends on the company that you get into. You may want to think about that. You may want to think about, okay, what type of environment do I do best in? I tend to work I like environments where it's very sophisticated. I think that one of the reasons why I've been in education for 20 years is because of the first college I worked for. That university, and I won't shout out their names, but that university had such a structured way of onboarding its um faculty. Like it was rigorous. Like before we even got a job, we had to go through all this training. We had to do simulation teaching. We had to do forums. We had to do open call discussions with other professors. I mean, it was intense. You hear me? And and if you got past, it's almost like what they call, H week, y'all, some of y'all know what that is. It was like that because that whole week it's like phase one, phase two, phase three, and you still don't even know if you got the job. And then once you got past all of that, you got the job, and then they put you into this rigorous training. And then, it was so structure that you could not fail. Like you really could not fail. And because of that structure, when I had working at that university, every other university was a piece of cake. Every other university was a piece of cake, man. I've taught, graduate school in New York with international students. I've actually taught in Africa. I've taught at a lot of universities and colleges. I've taught at schools where they literally gave me a piece of paper and it was like, okay, you go figure it out, find the book, find the syllabus, put it together, do it yourself. Um, and I have been able to thrive because of that training. So for me, I love the training. Now, some other people are like, okay, I don't want all that yipper yapper. I just want to just do hands-on and I want to see the work. I worked in an environment like that too, and I failed miserably at it. Like I could have been a wealthy investment accountant had I done well in that environment. I remember back in 9/11, some of y'all may remember 9/11. Um, a lot of banks came down to Florida, and I ended up getting a job for the bank in New York. And I was an investment accountant, right? Really wonderful title. I was young and dumb, and I should have stayed, but I got so like intimidated by the environment because they didn't teach. The only thing they did was they literally made me sit with a employee and they just said, watch what they do. So you literally had to sit there for 8 hours and watch this person work. And this person's not really telling you what they're doing. They're just poking around and they're doing this and doing that. We're talking about money, right? I did horribly at the job. I couldn't wait to get out of there. I mean, of course I was young and dumb. I should have stayed, but I didn't know any better. I was just so intimidated by the onboarding process. It was almost non-existent. And I just failed miserably. And I didn't have enough, you know, knowledge to know, like, Cynthia, you need to work this out yourself. Like, don't run away from it. But I did. So everybody's going to have a different view on how they like to be onboarded, but make sure whatever questions that you may have, regardless of the situation, you get answered, because the more you get your questions answered, the more comfortable the process will be for you. Now, again, whether you're on site or on remote, I think it's relative to you guys, because many of you may have jobs that require you to travel. So on site versus remote it's kind of, what does that mean really? But if you are going to be at the same location every day, we'll call that on site, right? So clearly you want to know about the building protocols, telephones, security, all that type of stuff. If you're a remote employee, let's say you're working primarily on the road and maybe your company gives you a laptop or whatever, then you may want to know, where do I go? Is there a main office? Do I have an office space when I do come in? Things of that nature. What are the hours of the building? When is it open? So, if I know if I'm coming off the road, can I go there? Or however that is, so you want to pay attention. Most times this is the type of stuff that they'll be talking to you about, but you want to pay attention to that you hear them well, right? So you understand, how this is going to go, because nothing is more nerve-wracking than you not knowing what's happening around you. That is what really, makes us all freak out. Now, moving to your promotion, right? You just got this new job. We're all excited. We've put up our LinkedIn accounts. Like, when do you say, hey, I gotta have a new job? Now, I'm going to say it's up to you, right? Some people wait it out a bit to make sure it's the right fit, make sure they're going to be there, make sure they're not going to, not have the job for whatever reason. Y'all know some companies have their 90-day rule where they evaluate you. You know, you never know, right? So when you post saying I have a new job, it's up to you, whether you want to wait it out or whether you want to say it right away. Just be mindful that, sometimes companies would like to connect with you on LinkedIn, or, and they use it as a way to promote themselves. Let me just be honest. And then the people that work there, they also want to connect with you. I mean, is at your discretion. Some people like connecting with coworkers online, some people don't. I would say, you know, definitely if you are going to connect with coworkers, I would keep it limited to LinkedIn. I definitely wouldn't do like other social media platforms. You just don't want that. You want to try to keep your privacy as much as possible, unless you have those business Instagram accounts, like I told you, that, yeah, you can connect with people because it's a networking. But when it starts to come to your personal Instagram and stuff like that, I would say use that sparingly, and use your discretion on that, because you really don't want, in my opinion, your company, in your personal business like that. So, that's my 2 cents. Now, there's this big thing called performance evaluations. I call it a big thing because depending upon what type of institution you work for, this will be a big part of your career. How many of you have had a performance evaluation before? Give me a thumbs up if you've had one. Sometimes these things make or break people. Okay, I see Ian's had one. These performance evaluations, I'm just going to tell you this. Okay, I see a couple people have had one. Take this seriously. And just like training, some companies take this extremely seriously, and some companies barely do their job. And I'm going to say fortunate enough, but in reality, I've just been around long enough to where I've had a lot of different types of companies I've worked for. Fortunately, though, for me, performance evaluations, I got those right out the gate because I was in the military. And then when I got out of the military, I went right into corporate America. And the first few jobs that I had they had very structured performance evaluations. So I learned the process of performance evaluations, such that when I went to other institutions that were not as sophisticated, but they wanted to do these evaluations, maybe they had to do them because they had a contract, or maybe it was a part. Put yourselves on mute, guys. I just want to let me just, because I'm getting some feedback and we don't want to record what you're saying. So, when I worked at companies who had less sophisticated systems, I could manage my own self, because there are some companies that will be like, okay, just fill this paper out and we got to do this, for the end of the year. And I was like, what are you saying? But if you get an opportunity to work with an institution that has really good performance evaluations processes, it's going to work in your favor. So let me tell you really quickly how the process works. A really, really efficient company will sit you down in the beginning, whether they do this in the orientation or they do it afterwards within that first 60 days, and they will tell you what the goals of the institution are. If you think about it, think of it like you're starting a new football team or sports team. If the coach doesn't tell you what are we trying to do, I should know what's the history of the team, who's in charge, who are the key players, what are we trying to accomplish. The same thing in corporate corporate America. You need to know what's the deal, so typically a CEO, rather, a HR director will come in, give you the scope, the scale, lay out the plan, the strategic goals of the institution. Then what should happen, your direct supervisor, sometimes with HR, should tell you or even the CEO could then also tell you what the strategic goals are for the year, right? Because a company is always going to have long-term vision, 5-year goals, 10-year goals, and then they're going to have an annual goal. That's important for you because that is where you're being evaluated. So you need to know what is the annual goal of the company. So if you work for a company, let's say, any of your fields, they're all, let's say, companies that have a lot of different sites, whether it's a, veterinary site, HVAC, welding, electrical, whatever. They have a lot of different sites all over Florida. So they say to you that their goal for this year is to open up let's say 2 new offices in a new region and to get 100 new clients. That's their strategic goal. Now you have understanding, okay, that's what they're trying to do. Then the next obvious step should be, well, where do I fit into that, right? Because I'm here to do electrical, HVAC, welding, or VA, but where do I fit into this goal? Well, clearly, you're going to do one or two things, and this is how businesses works. The only way a business gets to its bottom line, and if you think about income and expenses, they either need to grow, right? So get more money, or reduce their expenses. And how do they reduce their expenses? They have to be efficient. So you are an agent of the institution. So they should be sitting you down and saying one thing. Here's what you're going to do. You are either going to help us grow by getting more customers, and no, not as a salesperson, but as a retention person, because that's your job to retain, or you're going to help them be more efficient by reducing costs. So your supervisor should be like, okay, Tom, we're bringing you on, we're trying to open up these 2 new offices. As you go out, let's say you're out and you're working with clients, whether you're VA and you're just accepting patients, or you're doing, on the road, getting these new clients. Here is what your goal is. In order to help us meet this initiative, you are going to do 15 clients per month, 15 new clients per month. This can be both clients we already have and new clients. And your job is to make sure you get a 95% success rate. Oh, why does that make sense? Well, obviously that's a retention rate, right? If customers are happy with you, they stay. Because if we're trying to grow, we don't need anybody to leave. You see how that works? So there should be a direct understanding on what the company's goals are and how you play a part. That builds buy-in, right? So now, and they'll put in and they'll say, these are your goals. So we're going to give you some objectives for the year. Here are your objectives. So for this year, 15 clients per month, 95% happiness rate. And we don't want you, and we want you to have like 0 deficiencies, or minimal deficiencies for whatever you're doing. Right now, that is going to tie into them, the big, and that's all they need you to do, because you're one person, right? You're just one person in the big old chain. So if you're doing your part, now you understand, okay, these people are trying to get 2 new spaces, 100 new clients. It's my job to do 15 a month. Now it makes sense. Then what should happen is, normally 6 months in, your supervisor should do a check-in with you to see if you're staying on target. Are you staying on target with your 15 clients? Are you continuing to get a 95% success rate? Now you understand what the point is. Most importantly, if in that midpoint, if there's any issues or discrepancies, y'all can fix it. Maybe you're talking to your supervisor and you're like, well, here's what's been happening. The machine's been broken. We've had a lot of cancellations, or whatever that conversation is. Now, obviously, you probably won't be just waiting until that 6 months to talk about this, because ideally, your supervisor should be meeting with you once a month at least, just as a check-in, nothing formal. And the whole objective is to keep this going. That's why they're called managers. They're supposed to be managing this process as you're working, right? That's what an efficient institution looks like, such that by the time you get to the end of the year, and you're doing your evaluating how well you've done, there should be no surprises. You should already know, have I had my 15 clients? Have I done 95? You want to keep track of your own stuff. You should know if you have 98. Why is that important for you? Because guess what? When they do your evaluation, 9 times out of 10, that supervisor is going to tell you, hey, write down some notes of how well you've done for the year. Sometimes you get really good supervisors who has that information, and sometimes you don't, but you're not going to place your career in their hands. We already know that. So you are going to keep your own files on how well you've done, such that, if they're giving out raises or they're giving out promotions, and some institutions have really structured raises and promotion standards, so they may say, if you score 8 or above, then you get a 2% raise. If you score a 9, you get a 4% raise. That's how it works, right? So you want to make sure you have your facts, right? Yeah, I've been doing 98% and above. So I've been doing above the 95%, run me my money. That's how that works, right? So that's why it's important for you to understand how that works. If an opportunity comes up and you get a wonderful performance evaluations because you've been doing what you're supposed to do, 2-3 years down the road, a job comes up, you can walk in there confidently, say, yeah, I'm applying. Look at me. I have wonderful evaluations, which is how you use these evaluations to get the promotion. Some companies will even ask you for your evaluations if you go to another company, especially if you're doing like government type works. A lot of times government entities want to know, okay, what was your last evaluation like? So this is why you want to have that process. Now, I'm just going to be honest with you. A lot of companies you go to, especially those that may be a little smaller, they're going to be like, what's an evaluation? You can be like, man, this is some nonsense. Like, and it's okay because, but where that can become an issue, and some of you probably can already attest to it, when you don't have an evaluation, what tends to happen? Now, how well you do is at the mercy of the person that you're working with. Now, if now is getting into that corporate politics. Now you got to, be all nice to the supervisors so they can like you. You don't really know what you want. You could think you're doing a good job. They may not think you're doing a good job. You can do your work for forever, and then the one time you do something bad, and they try to say you're not a good employee, or maybe you just don't have the same personality types. Is this resonating with anybody? This is horrible, right? Horrible, because now your whole job and your career is at the mercy of this, egotistical supervisor and manager. It's horrible, right? And you don't want that environment. So this is what I mean by you have to take control of your career. You don't let these companies dictate how well you do. When you get in there, again, you don't know what you don't know, but others do. You are going to go into some situations where you're more sophisticated than the environment that you're in. And it's your job to evaluate, is this a place I want to lay my head, right? Just like when you're getting married, or is this somewhere I want to put down roots? Is this somewhere I want to, provide my services? How is it going to benefit me? And if you see a lot of red flags, that's why sometimes within that first 90 days, you've been looking for a lot of jobs, so you can work at a company and be like, oh, this ain't working for me. And you can put your hat back in the ring with other companies and call them up within that first 90 days. You don't even have to put that job on your resume. That's why we tell people, hey, maybe you want to not be so quick to announce stuff, because you don't know what that environment is going to be like until you get there. Am I telling you to bounce from place to place? I am not. I am telling you to be strategic about where you work and where you lay down roots, because you're not going to be able to get that time back, right? Now, when it comes to workplace etiquette, we all know, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, so just be aware of your surroundings. Y'all know how office politics works, and we don't need any of this drama. So, hey, if they got their music low, keep your music low. If everybody got their name on their lunch, put your name on your lunch. Like, just little silly stuff. Just, that's the corporate environment, and I call it silly, but this is just little stuff that kill careers, because fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of times the CEO dictates what we call the corporate culture and climate. So when we talk about culture, you could be in an environment where the culture is very, collaborative, and you're expected to be a team player, or it can be very, everybody kind of, is worried about their own selves because the CEO has kind of created this, everybody's against one another. That's a culture. The climate could be very tense. It could be very, competitive, so but that CEO is the one that typically is controlling that environment. That's another reason why you want to figure out, okay, is this somewhere I want to be? Because typically it doesn't get better, right? It don't get better, right? You may get better at navigating the situation, but the situation until that CEO leaves, or maybe it's immediate supervisor, that's the problem. Unless those guards change, it doesn't get any better. And so you have to decide, okay, can I fulfill my short-term goals? Because we managing our goals here. We're not really thinking about these people. My short-term goal was to stay at a job with an apprenticeship program for 3 years. I'm in here. These people look a little crazy. Can I handle it? Or do I need to go somewhere else? They don't need to know your business. But when you stand on business and you have a plan, it helps you sometimes hold your nose and just deal with things and write it out. But that's why it's so important to have that goal, because when you have a true north, you're not so, influenced by what's happening around you. Another thing that will happen in your first, week or so, you're going to get, well, first week or so, but throughout all of your careers, especially in any trades, is a lot of workplace safety training. You're going to so much workplace safety training. So just go ahead and get ready for that. Make sure you drink your coffee the first couple of days, because you're going to be trading, right? Like I said, if it's a very sophisticated institution, you're going to get a lot of training. And you're going to continue to get this training, especially for those of us that are, well, all of you are dealing in sensitive areas. So you're going to get a lot of training. You're going to get a lot of inspections, a lot of audits. People are going to be coming, checking up on you. You're just in that environment, right? So just go ahead and mind and get your mind going for that. All right. Boom. That's it. So that's what chapter 13 is about. Any questions? Sound good? I know.
Miss Gaylor,
Mm-hmm.
can you unlock week 3? What was it? Give me one second. Let me pull it back up.
All right, while he's doing that, conference question. What is your biggest first day anxiety? What is your biggest first day anxiety? That is your question for today. Week 3 should be open with the exception of the conference questions.
No, it's the mock interview results, because you said for me to upload the form that I received for career services.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. Guys, please, hopefully it's none of you guys, probably people that don't come to class. Do not just put done in your mock interview results. They gave you a piece of paper. They should have given you a piece of paper. If they didn't give you a piece of paper, go get it. You have to upload the results in the mock interview. Does everybody know what I'm talking about? Yeah, that's how you show that you went to the mock interview. So mock interview results, week 3. Mock interview results. Oh, okay. So let me open that up. That should have been open until Wednesday. All right. All right, guys. So get that done. I'm gonna check my email. I know sometimes I get them via email, but tell your person to send you they know this, so I don't know.
Okay, then I need to resubmit mine because I pressed done. My bad. I'll do it. I resubmit mine.
No problem. I'm just making sure it's open for everybody. All right. Let's
Did you
see
get
my
mine
interview
too?
results. Yeah, and I've opening it now for everybody for Wednesday. All right. All right, y'all.
Have a good day.
Have a good day. Take care.